Hey everyone, it's KP here. Or maybe you saw my name, Kevin Crunch, because now I am going to start doing one of my hobbies, which is playing video games, and I will start live streaming it over on my YouTube channel coming very soon, because honestly, it is very easy to create for YouTube. They have a built-in scheduling system that you can make. It will just be easier for myself, but in any case, the real point why we're here right now. Some of you maybe have come over to this channel just because I also do a podcast with my buddies where we do pop culture reviews of movies and television shows alike, and then we kind of do touch into some comic books. But my whole point of being here right now today is that I'm going to do some different movies and some other comic books that we don't really touch in our podcast. The reason I wanted to do this is basically because I want to start creating a variety of content of things I enjoy and hobbies that I have. But in any case, this is my first video, so please don't try to judge me too hard here. Just kind of get my feet into the water. But last night, I went and saw Oppenheimer. I wanted to do it as my first review because of a couple reasons. One, I wasn't terribly interested in this movie to begin with. I was probably in the minority there. I do love history. I love learning about history, but I will admit that sometimes it's not all aspects of history. So I didn't go into a huge expectation to this movie, or even really kind of knowing entirely what it would be about. I really don't know anything about the actual man that was Robert Oppenheimer. But I will say this. For an early, non-spoilery review, I cannot talk, it's very, very good. It definitely deserves the ratings that it's getting across a bunch of other, big review websites. The scores that it's receiving are warranted. It draws you in from the get-go. You keep kind of progressing throughout this movie with questions and questions of first what it's about, then when you kind of get that answer, then it's like, okay, well, where does this go? And even though the movie is very long at 3 hours, I will say I felt it in the first hour, definitely, but then after that, I was kind of really drawn into it, like I said a second ago, and it's worth the 3 hours if you're a Christopher Nolan fan, if you're a history buff, or if you're just genuinely interested about a movie that's about a pivotal point in the world and how, this changed the world when they essentially figured out. And when I say they, I mean Heisenberg and Oppenheimer and many other physicists and scientists, that when they figured out of how to split space between atoms, create essentially the building ground for nuclear power. It starts with just essentially when Oppenheimer is a young man. Probably time frame wise, maybe late 20s, early 30s. He goes over across the seas to essentially start learning from some of the best minds in physics, and he does for a while. Pretty quick, though, that it becomes apparent that he does need to get back over to the United States, and so he does. Basically recommended to him from some other individuals. When he comes back to America, he first is teaching at, I believe it's Cal Berkeley is the university, and at that time period, there were a lot of people that apparently were communists at the school, and they sort of were and were not hiding it, is kind of how the movie shows it to you. It does do a good job that Josh Hartnett's character kind of tells Oppenheimer and some others to not promote that they're having meetings over their political party affiliation and They're expressing their ideas because it just wasn't really flying at that time in the country, and it was not received well, and definitely not you were definitely probably put on a list if you were, walking around toting all that. And you were being watched, most likely. Which actually the movie does kind of get into a lot later, as they jump forward throughout time. And that's the thing that this movie does, is it does go back and forth a lot. It has scenes in black and white where it's mainly dealing with Strauss, who's played by Robert Downey Jr., who's dealing with a hearing to determine if the man Oppenheimer essentially was a security risk to national security, and if he maybe knowingly gave information to the Soviets to assist the Soviets in the nuclear arms race that we had with them basically throughout through the early Cold War, is what I'll say and get at. So it jumps from that time frame to where we're at the starting point with Oppenheimer and going through the 1930s and how he was teaching at Cal Berkeley. He was meeting with communists that were having get-togethers and parties. And even though he never said he was joining the party, he did always express that he shared their views on certain political aspects, which, since he was so open about that, a lot of people didn't like him for. And that actually kind of what took some time for him to, I think, be placed on the Manhattan Project in reality. In the movie, it essentially is introduced that there is a project that's come along. They don't really allow him to know about it because of said known connections to communists. Eventually, I think Matt Damon's character was Leslie Groves, was the general that was put in charge of finding a director for this Manhattan Project. He gives him a laundry list of why he shouldn't put him in charge of the project, essentially detailing out what a ton of other people have said about Oppenheimer, and he ignores it and still puts him in charge. And then Oppenheimer actually devises this way for all the best minds in the country that they realized were spread out all over. You had some in California, some in Illinois and Chicago, some probably in Texas, I would assume, or possibly that might have been one location they were talking about, and then others in New York, of course. Well, Oppenheimer's thought on it was, let's have everyone come together, and he spearheaded building Los Alamos in New Mexico, which was a town that basically the military built right up to establish a community for all of these scientists and their families so they could live there at that site for 3 years while they developed the atom bomb. They just go through it a lot. And while that's going on, it kind of keeps jumping around between two other separate incidents that happened in Oppenheimer's life. First, he had basically a security clearance hearing, I think later on in the later 1940s, that I think was on the hydrogen bomb is what's happening. And then again, it does kind of keep jumping up to the point of the 1954 hearing with some of the, I believe they were senators that had Strauss on, not really a trial, but questioning as to Oppenheimer's security. And, did he, leak things to the Russians, and, did he have a leak in his own security? Like, did he knowingly have a leak? So the movie kind of progresses through, those two incidents of how Strauss is being interrogated and he's telling his side of the story in 1954, and then there's the part of Oppenheimer who's telling his side of the story in, I believe it's 1949. And essentially some of it is, again, a lot of these individual things that were happened while going through the 3 years of building the atom bomb in Los Alamos, and then a lot of with what Strauss is talking about is events after the fact of the said atom bomb. The movie is very, very, very good. To cut to the chase, I would still recommend to go see it. It does a very good job of building up really intense moments. The movie does do a very good job of showing how Oppenheimer, felt guilty about this, even though, yes, it was a breakthrough in science, but they knew that what America was going to use it for, they didn't feel comfortable that a lot of innocent people were effectively going to die with the use of this bomb. There's a scene where they are in a war console, essentially, and he's trying to have everyone just first seek, a peace or a warning agreement with Japan before even dropping the 2 atomic bombs that we did drop on the 2 major cities. And it does even highlight moments where some of this, he tried to even meet with Truman at the time to warn him not to use them. Once they tested the bomb, and the bomb was good, and they knew they could use it, the military came up and took the 2 they made. The movie does actually get into how later on that, he tried to, talk to Truman about it post, after the fact. It's a very interesting cameo there for the actor that plays the president at the time, and it's just a moment that's kind of meant that he felt guilty, even though everyone was saying that, he did his country a great favor because it brought soldiers home. But in any case, I would say definitely go see the movie, because it does develop into, this sort of this big drama of, because of his communist views and his, even though, again, he never aligned himself with the party, because of his past, and there's an individual that's out to get him in this movie, and you will find out why. I won't spoil entirely too much, and I don't want to keep this video too long, that it becomes interesting as to how it's all going to fold out. And what's great about it is just the way it does fold out, and then how, he gets stripped of his security clearance to the hydrogen bomb project in the nuclear arms race, and then years down the road, it becomes a question of national security, of if he was leaking information to the Russians, whether it was knowingly or not. And the way that it all gets resolved and is very, it's dramatic, but, that's what it is with Hollywood and movies. But it's very, very good, and I would definitely, again, recommend to definitely go see it. It's one of Christopher Nolan's best movies he's made. It's the best movie he's made in a handful of years. So that's my quick review of this movie. If you didn't mind this review, I will have more to come. Just like and subscribe my channel. And of course, if you would like to know any reviews on pop culture material that's going on with Marvel, DC, Star Wars, and sometimes other high fantasy sci-fi things, go over to my podcast channel, which is Tardy to the Party, and we upload weekly. And until next time, I am KP. Thank you for listening and watching.